I see Tank and Garcia. I think it's a much more interesting fight than a lot of people think. Um, I think both Tank's people and Garcia's people gotten it wrong in the sense that it's gonna be. I don't think like Garcia. I don't. There's no. In my opinion, I don't believe Garcia will knock Tank out in 2 rounds. I believe it is if it is an early stoppage, I'm more certain it would go in Tank's favor. And if it goes on longer, it would go more to Garcia. And here's why. I think Tank is now, although he's been talking shit and he it seems like he doesn't take Garcia seriously, I'm pretty sure that deep down in his mind, he would be in phenomenal shape, in the shape of his life to fight Garcia. I think that's a fight that and if he doesn't know, then Mayweather would be the first one to tell him that's the fight he needs to win. That fight he needs to be razor sharp for it, right? So again, what do I think Tank's advantages are in that fight? I think Tank is the bigger punch out of the two. I think Tank is technically the more skilled guy. I think technically he has more in his arsenal than Garcia. I think he has better mechanisms, more ways to counter, more ways to more ways. He has more ways to knock you out. Simple fact that he has power in both hands. He is very sneaky with his uppercuts. He has more experience. He's been in there with more good guys. I don't think he hasn't fought anyone as good who presents the problems that Garcia does, but that's also because he comes from 126, right? So what do I think his advantages are other than his speed and his power? Again, his mental intensity. I think Tank needs to approach this fight from a perspective of he needs to be mentally completely calm. He needs to be relaxed and he needs to be willing to go the distance. He needs to come in, start using his jab, use a lot of feints, and I think he needs to get Garcia to the ropes with head movement, with his double jab, and not commit to that left hand until Garcia has nowhere else to go. I think he cannot commit to that wide left hand until Garcia is in a position where he can't really back out, where even where he backs out straight, he still gets caught. Because that's a big thing people were talking about. If Tank were to land that left hand on Garcia, Garcia wouldn't have stood up. Yes, this is true. He wouldn't have. But Campbell's arm is about this much longer than Tank's arm. If the reason why Garcia got caught with that shot is because he stepped back with his chin up in the air and got clipped, right? Now, a guy like Tank, if Tank threw that same left hand that Campbell threw, he wouldn't have landed because Garcia, by leaning back, will create too much distance, right? So Tank has to come from underneath, right? He has to feint. He has to make Garcia throw his hook, right? He has to feint to make Garcia throw his hook, thinking he's coming in, and then under that hook, come up with his own right hook and his own left uppercut. I also think Tank needs to invest in the body in that fight. And he needs to intimidate Garcia. He needs to show him. He needs to put up the hands, walk into have some shots blocked off, and make Garcia feel like he needs to make Garcia feel like he needs to find a way out. He needs to create distance. He needs to make Garcia feel worried about him not being able to maintain the proper distance, because Garcia isn't good on the inside. He didn't know what to do. Campbell was getting off shots easily when they were getting off inside. Garcia was just whipping shots from the side. Campbell was blocking, and then he would come back with a body shot, right? So it's the same thing with Davis. If Davis gets in the distance, Garcia is going to have issues with that. He's not going to know how to deal with that, especially against a guy who is so short. And being short on the inside is going to give you so much more leverage fighting in close, right? If Tank is able to do that, and is able to continuously cut that distance and to not overcommit with shots from too far away, I think Tank wins pretty easily. The issue is, again, his mindset. Is he gonna be calm like that, or is he just gonna try and rip Garcia's head off? Is he gonna just come in there, block some shots, walk him down, and try to rip his head off? That's the question, right? From Garcia's perspective, you need to see, what I think we need to see is we need to see a lot more feints than we saw against Campbell. He's gonna have to walk sideways instead of walking backwards. We saw in the Campbell fight that Garcia was having issues keeping the outside. So Garcia very rarely managed to have his left foot on the outside of Campbell's right foot, right? Which made it very difficult to land his left hook, because the way it works is when a southpaw fights a right-handed guy, right? If you have the outside lane, if you have your foot on the outside, that means it puts you in position to throw your strong hand, your backhand, straight down the middle, in between the guard of the other guy, and your left hook comes around the guard because you're basically shifted to the side a little bit, right? Now, so Garcia wasn't really focusing on that. He didn't care too much about it, and he had his foot on the inside, right? What did that mean? That means that if I'm Garcia and my head is here, right, and I throw my left hook, Campbell's head is going to be over here, right? So my left hook I don't have space to throw my left hook, especially when Campbell comes in, right, closes distance. Campbell's front shoulder is going to be here, so I won't be able to create space to put power behind my left hook, right? Garcia needs to be more aware of that against Tank, and he also needs to be walking to the sides because he doesn't want to be walking back, giving Tank forward momentum. So it's going to be very important for Garcia to keep moving sideways away from Tank's left hand, right, with the foot on the outside to control Davis' right hook, and to be able to pull with your jab, with your right hand, and with that left hook, you're able to keep Tank off balance as you keep moving to the left, at the same time as you're not going back, enabling Tank, which would enable Tank to get forward momentum, which is what we all know he likes to do, come forward and fight, right? That's how I believe, that's how I think both fighters should approach this fight. I believe that if we see this, it's gonna be a great boxing match, because again, although Tank is a more polished guy skill-wise, stylistically Garcia presents a lot of problems for Tank, in my opinion. But it's interesting because it might be something completely different. We might see a Tank who wants to rip Garcia's head off, in which case he either succeeds. I think either Garcia folds mentally and just gets frazzled by that kind of mental pressure the Tank puts on, and folds, and Tank will get an early stoppage, or Tank tries to rush in and to rip his head off, and Garcia doesn't get intimidated. Now, if this happens, and this is why that fight is so interesting, if Tank does try to rush in and to rip Garcia's head off, and Garcia is not scared of it, and Garcia reacts well to it, then I see Garcia getting rid of Tank in 7 to 8 rounds, because I think that in that case, where all tactic really goes out the window on Tank's behalf. I think it's only a matter of time until Garcia starts landing that left hand. I think Tank just is going to be forced to come in. We're not going to see the same Garcia that was fighting Campbell on that front foot with his jab. We're going to see Garcia more on the back foot and more looking for that counter, because he knows that Tank has to come in, right? Now, you can also expect Garcia to be extremely sharp, because if he does fight Tank, if that fight does get made, I would be very surprised if Canelo Alvarez wasn't Garcia's main sparring partner for this fight. And although he's not a lefty, he presents speed, more power, not more speed, but more power, and he also is a shorter, stockier guy who's going to essentially have to do the same things that Tank has to do to come in, to land his shots, right? So if Garcia is able to keep Canelo at the end, like if Garcia does well with Canelo, then 12 weeks of sparring with Canelo Alvarez is, I mean, that gets you, I don't think anything in the world would get you as sharp as that. So I think it would only be a matter of time. Obviously, you know, Tank is coming from the other side, but right hooks still come from the left. If I'm on the receiving end, a right hook is still going to come on my left, and a left hook is still going to come on my right. So from that perspective, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. I'm sure Garcia is going to have lefty sparring partners, but yeah, and the reason why I emphasize so much on Tank is because it really is up to him. Tank is going to be the one who's going to make the fight faster or slower paced, especially in the beginning, right? And then, yeah, I think it's a very interesting fight. If I'm asked for a prediction, just off the top of my head, I would say either Tank in 3 or 4 rounds, or Garcia in between rounds 7 and 9. I would be very surprised that fight goes to decision. I would really love to see it. I think it's a super interesting matchup.